I became involved with PACM because I've always been conscious and very much aware of injustice and the plight of our people. So, and I have been of one of those people who feel that you're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution. So I've kind of made it my lifelong commitment to be involved and do whatever I can do so that hopefully I leave my community a bit better than I found it. At least I try to. And so from in the late 60s, 70s, I've been involved at different levels in different activities, community, both on a community level and on a national level. And Nana Bonsu really, through the Pan-African Congress movement, that's how I really got to know him. So you talk about my memories of him. He was a larger than life statesman, like father, elder. He was, as you probably know, physically he was large, but so was his heart. He had a big, big heart and a profound love and respect for human beings, not just his own people, but particularly in terms of African people. There was that, he saw that need to do whatever he could. So that, again, he would leave the community better than he found it. I mean, obviously, the Pan-African Congress movement were a national organization, and he headed up the Manchester branch, but also within the PACM, he was like the father, the statesman, the elder, the one that we all look to, in terms of wisdom. You have some people, they're old, but they have no wisdom, because wisdom is the application of knowledge. And he had that capacity to apply the knowledge in situations. And so over the years, when we've had events such as African Liberation Day, which we've held up and down the country, when it's in Manchester, Nana Bonsu would ensure that whatever resources he was able to galvanize to make sure it happened. And whether it was out of his own personal resources, it would happen because, as I said, he really had such a huge heart, and so generous and that. So over the years, we've worked together, we've supported each other, we've come up to events that he's put on, and he really, throughout his period in the PACM, was that stabilizing force, that reason, he brought reason and sense to situations, and he was so well respected that, when Nana Bonsu spoke, you listened, Just a very, very, it was such a pleasure to have known him, and certainly on a personal level, my life became enriched by knowing him. I learned a lot from him in terms of humility, in terms of love, in terms of decency, and honesty and integrity. Those were some of the qualities he had. Like all other human beings, he had his shortcomings, but he was such a wonderful, and I can't put it any other way, because when I speak of him, I kind of think of the kind of love and respect that I had for my own parents, and that's how I would speak of them. So, I know our relationship there was a political, but he was just such a decent human being. Because, there are people, they're in politics and they're good in politics, but they're not decent, but he was. I would say Nana Bonsu lived Marcus Garvey's philosophy in terms of how he conducted himself. He was a strong believer in self-help. He had a passion for young people. Sometimes some of our elders, demonize some of our young people and really don't have that relationship. I think he was able to have that relationship with young people because he, rightly saw them as the future and felt that we needed to do that investment in terms of investing time and energy in young people. But in terms of the philosophy of Marcus Garvey, which was about race first and doing for self, but Nana Bonsu, I think he lived that reality, and he tried as much as he could to follow in the footsteps of Garvey, because he was a great Garveyite. I felt that Marcus Garvey was the greatest African that had walked the face of this earth.
Is there any other special moments that you remember from Nana and that it has touched your existence now and why you do your work?
Yeah, because as I said, for me, I feel that the greatest tribute I could pay to him is to continue to do whatever I can for my community. Okay, I'm not in Manchester in terms of the locality, but then, Nana Bonsu was the kind of person that was caught up in territory, in the territorial thing, the tribalism, whether you're from Manchester or Birmingham, or whether you're from Guyana or Jamaica or wherever part, the fact that you're an African, quite often your experiences were exactly the same, wherever we were. And therefore, the greatest tribute that I feel I can continue to pay to him is to do whatever I can do for as long as I can. And being here working in this environment in terms of working with our people and their experiences in mental health is part of that. We also have a Saturday school that I'm not as involved now, but my sister runs on a voluntary basis. That's about investing in young people. The Pan-African Congress movement, which, we're still very involved in, and I'm currently the chair. And we make sure that at least some of the basic programs continue, like African Liberation Day, the Kwanzaa celebrations, and bringing international speakers from all parts of the world so that they can come and share their knowledge and their experience with the African community in the UK. All that is continuing in the vein of the work which he started. And I know that he would be pleased to see that we're at least, he'll probably be thinking we're not achieving as much as we should, but I'm sure he'd be pleased that we're at least doing something. Well, we all have a responsibility, including you, to make sure it happens, because he's laid the foundation. Whilst he was here on earth, he did his bit. And so there's a responsibility on all of us who are exposed to it or become aware of it to do what we can. And that's where the challenge is, in terms of those who are prepared to pick up that kind of baton and continue. Because in terms of the work for our race and for our community, I always say to relay, And oftentimes the tragedies, there's nobody to pass the baton on to. Or they drop it, or there's nobody in the relay. And Nana Bonsu has gone on, and it's about that legacy staying alive by people not taking his life and his contribution for granted, but building on that. And that's the challenge. And in terms of our young people, it's about that awareness. It's about that understanding of self, of race, and know what is possible. Because I think the problem with a lot of our young people, there's no sense of identity, no sense of purpose. And they lose their way. And they think there is only a particular path along which they should go, which often, it's sadly for some of them, is quite destructive, and destructive for us as a people and as a race. And I think, the legacy that he's left in Manchester, that richness, but it won't keep itself alive unless people are prepared to make that investment and that commitment and build on it. Otherwise, in 10, 20 years, I will say, oh yeah. Young people will be saying, who was Nana Bonsu? And that shouldn't be the case, because he, in terms of his contribution in Manchester and in this country, young people in Manchester should know who he is, because his name should be in the history book, in the local people. Young people need to understand the significance of that centre that's there and what he contributed and how he fought to keep it within the community. But it's not going to maintain itself, it's not going to sustain itself. But then if the community has no regard and no respect for the contribution that he made, then it's, his legacy won't continue. So the challenge is, because whilst nationally there will be those of us trying to do what we can, like they say back home, you have to dance a yard before you dance abroad. And so the work has to happen within Manchester. That's important. It must have been like in the 70s, 80s, because I was a young person there, and it was in the days of the kind of Black Power. It was spilling over from America, the Black Panther movement, and, there was different things happening here. And so we used to go on demonstrations, police brutality. A big, at the time, and I think this was the early 80s, and there was a conference at, I think it was Alexandra Palace with Bernard Cord. I'm not quite sure of the date. And it was around how the West Indian child is made educationally subnormal. A book written by Bernard Cord. And I remember going to a conference there, and this was about how particularly children from the Caribbean who came, including myself, who had joined my parents when I was about 13, when I came to this country, got put into a special needs class. There was no assessment. You were just put, because you'd come from the Caribbean, you'd be put in these ESN, educationally subnormal, it was called at the time. And Bernard Cord had been a teacher and had seen the injustice, and he'd written a book, and there was a conference. And I think that was where I probably met Nana Bonsu first. But I think what attracted, there was this huge African who stood out, because he had stature, being big and confident, and you could just see the love for his people oozing, and I think that was what attracted me. I thought, this is a father, this is, someone who is obviously committed, very knowledgeable, and I'm the kind of person I get drawn to people that I think I can learn from. If I'm with somebody, if I can't learn anything or improve my knowledge, and I don't like to waste time. And with Nana Bonsu, that was one of the things. He was so knowledgeable, and I just thought, this man can teach me, and I felt safe with him. I think that's very important as well. Say, as a woman, and there's an elder and there's somebody older than I felt that what I could learn, I could just get lots of knowledge from him, because he was so knowledgeable, so confident, and so committed. And I certainly know that he has inspired me, and he's helped to shape how I am, and in terms of whatever work I do for my community. And I feel I have a duty to him and to others who've kind of paved the way, because we stand on the shoulders of other people. They've built the foundation. We didn't just come and there was nothing there. Somebody else had made sacrifice, and he was one of those people. And I know he's made huge personal and family sacrifice in order to leave this legacy for the community. I think one of the main things would have been about a legacy, about having something or somewhere that's our own. Because you look throughout this country, other communities have something which they own, which they value, which they sustain. And sadly, we oftentimes will find more reasons why we shouldn't have anything than why we should. And Nana Bonsu was of that we have to do for self. So the driving force was about having that space, that safe space for our young people, for our elders, for our community. And I think that was what drove him to do all the investment and all the hard work. And that wasn't about whether you were from Guyana or Jamaica or Barbados. This was about, because you know, as we know, it just depended where the ship dropped us off. You know, we didn't have a say. You know, my foreparents didn't have a say that they went to Jamaica. That's just where they dropped them off. You know, so, and sometimes we hold on to these things, you know, it's sacred, you know, I'm a Bajan, I'm a Jamaican, as if we went there on a cruise ship or, you know, a jumbo jet by choice, you know. So he wasn't sacred about, yes, he was from Guyana, as I'm from Jamaica, and that's part of my history, but, you know, you can't be too sacred about it, because that's just where they decided to drop us off, for whatever reason. Nana Bonsu. And that was what I loved about him, you know. He wasn't into the tribalism business, you know, Jamaican and wherever you're from. It's about us as African people.